This episode is brought to you by my friend Rebecca Walser, a financial expert who can help you protect your wealth. Book your free call with her team by going to friendofdinesh.com. That's friendofdinesh.com. Coming up, I'll reveal the central role of CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency, in directing government censorship through digital platforms. Representative Clay Higgins of Louisiana joins me. We're going to talk about the evidence that could form the basis of multiple impeachments. And I'll show how a top Biden official was the leading conduit of COVID misinformation, even though she knew her claims were false. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Show.
Needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza Podcast.
There's a new report by the House Select Subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government, and it's part of their continuing exposure of the magnitude of censorship being pushed by all the different elements of the Biden regime. There's a very interesting phrase in this report I want to highlight, and it comes out of a document by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, which is called CISA, C-I-S-A. And it says that CISA is using, quote, a whole of government approach to tackling speech. We are working with federal partners to mature a whole of government approach to mitigating risks of MDM. MDM is misinformation and disinformation. So this whole of government approach is that we coordinate. We have CISA over here. We have the State Department over here, Department of Homeland Security. We have the FBI. We have the DOJ and the White House. And we are collectively pressuring these digital platforms to censor more. This is a disturbing development because, of course, it is horrendously unconstitutional. Congress shall make no law restricting freedom of speech or of the press. I'm essentially quoting the First Amendment, and Congress here refers to the entire federal government, including the delegated branch, the executive branch, which of course is authorized by Congress to carry out the laws that are passed by Congress. They too are forbidden from restricting freedom of speech, and yet here they clearly are. I'm quoting from the testimony now of Michael Schellenberger, testifying before the House. And he says, quote, the censorship industrial complex combines established methods of psychological manipulation, some developed by the U.S. military during the global war on terror, with highly sophisticated tools from computer science. So there's an effort here to really control and manipulate the minds of the American people. It isn't just a matter of I'm going to deplatform you or take down your post. It is we're trying to reshape the minds of the American people. And at the heart of this is this group called CISA. This is a group that was set up to protect against hacking. As the name suggests, a cybersecurity and infrastructure agency. So they're supposed to prevent, for example, efforts to interfere in election software, efforts to undermine the technological capacity of the United States. And yet, and here they are in a self-appointed role of regulating speech. They know that what they're doing is wrong. Why? Because they're trying to do it through the back door. In fact, the House has now discovered, the GOP House, that they have gone back on their website and taken out terms like disinformation and misinformation. They're hiding what they're doing. And this concealment operation is critical. Here's a Here's a September 26, 2022 email from Annalisa Craven. She's an assistant U.S. attorney with the Department of Justice. And she's talking about CISA documents that have been demanded under the Freedom of Information Act. Quote, "Could we please see a copy of any relevant CISA documents that you may plan to produce? We're also not sure when you receive the records request, but we'd like to have an extension of time to review them and assess whether we have to file suit to protect them from disclosure." So here's the DOJ saying to CISA, hey, listen, you don't have to give up those documents because we can file a motion to block it so you can continue to do your censorship in private without scrutiny by the media or by the American people. One other thing I want to highlight about the censorship industrial complex is that the term that keeps being used by CISA isn't just misinformation or disinformation, but a new term and a very telling one, malinformation. Now, what is malinformation? Well, the word mal generally means bad. Maladroit means someone who's clumsy. Maladministration, something that's poorly administered. So malinformation here is information that is, quote, bad information. But bad why? What's interesting is the way they define malinformation. It is, quote, information based on fact, but used out of context to mislead, harm, or manipulate. In other words, even if you say something that's true, this can be declared as being misleading because where's the context? Dinesh, you've made a quotation out of context. Now, first of all quotations are out of context because that's what it means to have a quotation. If I quote from War and Peace and you say, Dinesh, you have to provide the full context, well, that means I've got to quote the whole book. So a quotation is by definition something lifted out of the book. Now, if for some reason it inverts the meaning of the paragraph or the meaning of what the author is trying to convey, but the point here is that they are trying to censor accurate information because they believe it will have a harmful social effect, and they get to define what harmful is. So what you have here is disguised censorship that is often done by proxy. What CISA does, for example, is they feed information to these nonprofits. The nonprofits then deposit them into the portals of digital platforms. The digital platforms engage in the censorship. So this is quite clearly coordinated with the government. And as I say, it's not just censorship of things that are false, but also things that happen to be true. Mike Lindell has an amazing offer for my listeners and viewers on his Giza Elegance MyPillows. You'll get a Giza Elegance MyPillow for as low as $19.98. Regular price, $69.98. This MyPillow comes in 4 levels of support. You'll also get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, MyPillow towels, mattress topper, My Slippers, and so much more. Go to mypillow.com to get Mike's amazing offer on the Giza Elegance MyPillow for as low as $19.98 or call 800-876-0227 and use promo code Dinesh. The offer comes with a 10-year warranty, so you know it's going to last, a 60-day money-back guarantee. You have nothing to lose. It's time to start getting the quality sleep that we not only want, but need. Go to mypillow.com or call 800-876-0227. Use promo code Dinesh to take advantage of Mike's special offer on the Giza Elegance MyPillow. The number again, 800-876-0227. Don't forget to use promo code DINESH Dinesh. I mentioned yesterday about how the conflict in Ukraine is routinely presented as a clash between the liberal values of the West and the illiberal values of Putin and of Russia. Now, what are these so-called liberal values? They are values like free elections and democracy. They are values like freedom of speech, basic civil liberties, equal rights under the law. So the question becomes, are these values in fact being celebrated in the West? Are they being practiced in the West? Are they being practiced in Ukraine? Well, we know that Ukraine cracks down on political dissidents. We know that they restrict freedom of speech and other basic civil liberties. And so there is a rampant illiberalism in Ukraine. I'm not even going into the issue of the presence of Nazi forces as part of Ukraine's cherished battalions. But the latest development that cements the point that Ukraine is hardly a champion of liberalism is the cancellation of elections. So Ukraine is scheduled to have elections next year, but the president, Zelensky, says there won't be any elections next year as long as martial law remains in force due to the ongoing war in the country. Now, this is something that Zelensky said in a recent interview with the Washington Post. He's going to delay, not cancel, but indefinitely postpone the October elections that were scheduled. And the October elections were parliamentary elections, and the presidential election early next year. Now, it should be said that Ukraine is in wartime, and in wartime, you don't have the same liberties that you do in peacetime. Now, that is true all over the world. It was true in the United States in World War I and World War II, although arguably in World War I particularly, the restrictions against dissent and civil liberties were excessive. They're now generally acknowledged to be that way. Now, Zelensky in his interview with the Washington Post said, quote, that the Ukrainian constitution prohibits any elections during martial law. So this is his justification. We can't have an election because read the Ukrainian constitution. It doesn't allow elections during a war and during martial law. Now, if you take a look at the Ukrainian constitution, it doesn't say that. What it says is that in times of war and under martial law, elections may be suspended. So what's the distinction? Well, the distinction is that the Constitution says that you can have elections, but you don't have to have elections. It's, in a sense, the decision is left up to the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian president, which is Zelensky. So the point here is that Zelensky is choosing not to have an election, but he's trying to make it sound like a kind of inevitability. Oh, gee, my hands are tied. The Constitution says we can't have an election. The Constitution says you can. The Constitution says that elections may be suspended, but they don't have to be suspended. Now, if it seems like, wait a minute, Dinesh, when can you give an example where in the middle of a tumultuous war, a country had elections? And my example would be the United States in 1864, in the very heart of the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln allowed the presidential election to proceed on schedule. In fact, it's an election that he expected to lose. Lincoln was making preparations to vacate the White House. He thought the Democrats were going to win. It was only last-minute victories on the part of the Union Army, particularly in Georgia, that turned the tide of public opinion, and Lincoln comfortably won the 1864 election. So you can have elections. It's just that Zelensky is choosing not to. And I think all of this adds up to the fact that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to talk about Russia being illiberal and Ukraine being liberal when there's a kind of deep strain of illiberalism in both places. If aches and pains are your problem, Relief Factor is your solution. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago. The difference we've seen in our joints, nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. How does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor become regular customers. They order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can now do the exercises that for a long time she wasn't able to do. It's been a game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, Mike here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4-RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again, 800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. Guys, I'm really happy to welcome a new guest, Congressman Clay Higgins from Louisiana's 3rd District. He's a member of the House Freedom Caucus. He also serves on the House Homeland Security Committee and senior member of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee. You can follow him on Twitter at Rep. Clay Higgins. His website, clayhiggins.house.gov. Clay, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you. It seems like every single day there's some new revelation about the Biden family, not just Hunter Biden, but Joe Biden and the kind of family operation they appear to be running. Let me start by asking you, what is the level of concern about all this on your part and also the part of your colleagues, Republican colleagues in the House?
Well, our concern is primarily focused on whether or not our executive branch is compromised in some way, and unfortunately, the deeper we go into the investigation, the more it appears that's very likely to be the case. I mean, Hunter Biden and his behaviors and his struggles in life are of zero concern to us congressionally. But the fact that the Biden family, who we now refer to as the Biden crime family, have no doubt, according to bank records, which are quite reliable sources of investigative material. According to bank records, the Biden family, including Hunter and President Biden, have been involved in receiving large sums of money from overseas nations in exchange for apparently the access to the power that Joe Biden had as vice president, and the concern now is whether or not that compromise and that behavior, that criminal behavior from years ago, has extended into a compromised executive branch for the United States of America, a compromised president, may I add, inaugurated president of the United States. So we're very concerned, Dinesh, that the evidence we're revealing is quite legitimately indicative of criminal behavior. But we're not interested in Hunter at all, other than by virtue of the fact that he was essentially the point salesman, shall we say, for selling access to his dad. And then the laundering of payment is where the rest of the family members got involved, so that they could disperse those payments throughout the Biden family in the effort to conceal that money. That's what we're revealing, and it's startling to observe. It's shocking.
Now, am I right in understanding that even though there's a lot of focus on Gary Shapley and the IRS whistleblower and the tax element of this, which is that all this money comes in, you don't seem to have disclosed it or paid taxes on it, the real issue here isn't just the taxes, it's the legitimacy of the transactions in the first place, isn't it? In other words, it's the idea that Joe Biden and the Biden family were selling something, and now the question becomes what? Right? I notice a lot of mainstream media are not covering this, but let's just say that they were to cover it. Can you think of a legitimate defense here? Could they say, you know what, we're not selling political influence. We're actually selling, I don't know, apples. We're selling widgets. Do they have anything else to sell?
It's an important point, Dinesh, because you have, in any investigation, a criminal investigation, you have to take on the perspective of what we refer to as the reasonable man. So any reasonable assessment of the transactions that the Bidens were involved in, they were selling something, you're right. And the only thing they had to sell in these shell businesses that they set up, the shells were empty. It's why they're called shells. There was nothing there. It was selling they had no product nor service to sell. So a reasonable man would presume that, and the corroborative evidence that we've observed from other sources, emails, telephone conversations, whistleblower testimony, the corroborative evidence seems to support the reasonable conclusion that they were selling access to Joe Biden. And that's it. I mean, he was a senator for a long time. And if you think about the access to information and the access to stakeholders and very powerful men and women across the country and indeed the world that a long-standing senator would have, and then look at the power he would have as vice president for 8 years, and now as inaugurated president of the United States, it's quite clear that Joe Biden has a tremendous amount of influence across the world. And it's quite clear that Hunter Biden and the rest of the Biden crime family had nothing else to sell to these nation states other than access to Joe Biden. And why would they want access to Joe Biden? Because of his influence. So that is specifically, that's influence peddling. That is it's against the law. And further, it endangers the stability of the United States of America and the integrity of our interactions with nation states across the globe that rely upon us for the integrity of our executive branch. And if our executive branch is indeed compromised, Dinesh, then Congress must act, and the DOJ must act, although we have very little confidence in this DOJ. They've been involved in concealing some of this stuff.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, more from Congressman Clay Higgins. Debbie and I started eating better this year. We've lost weight, but foods we can't seem to eat enough of, and it's a requirement, are veggies and fiber. Now, what better way to get all your fruits and veggies plus fiber than with Balance of Nature? This is Balance of Nature's Fiber and Spice. It's a proprietary blend of 12 spices for digestive health. The intense flavors and deep colors of spices are the most condensed whole food source of phytonutrition available. It's recommended to be paired with this, the star product, fruits and veggies in a capsule. So easy. Select the whole health system for the best price. Start your journey to better health right now. Take advantage of Balance of Nature's great offer, $25 off plus free fiber and spice with your first preferred order of fruits and veggies when you use discount code AMERICA. The offer can end at any time, so act now. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com. Use discount code AMERICA. I'm back with Congressman Clay Higgins of Louisiana. You can follow him on Twitter at Rep. Clay Higgins. His website, clayhiggins.house.gov. Clay, we're talking about the Bidens and the Biden crime family, as you mentioned. Now, I want to highlight a couple of recently disclosed messages from Hunter Biden to Chinese entities. In the one case, Hunter Biden says, the Biden family is top of the line, I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting exactly, in being able to deliver what the chairman wants. Now, I'm assuming he's not talking about Chairman Xi, but the chairman of this Chinese entity, which is, of course, under the control of the Chinese government and the Chinese political forces. And in the second email, Hunter Biden is sort of trying to extract money, saying in effect, I'm sitting here with my dad, with my father, and you've made commitments and you better come through on these commitments right now. And if not, I will unleash, and my father will unleash our influence and our vengeance on you. I mean, this seems to me to be pretty close to a smoking gun, isn't it? I mean, Representative Claudia Tenney verified that this text was sent when Hunter Biden was at the Biden family residence. So Joe Biden was present. We don't know for a fact independently if he was in the room, but he was certainly on the premises. So how does one take something like this and then sort of nail it down by finding out exactly whether Joe Biden was there? Because that proves he was lying about having nothing to do. And I don't even know what my son's business dealings were. What are the next steps to be taken?
Well, clearly, it's a very incriminating piece of evidence, but it's one of many. And the defense that they seem to prefer, the Bidens and everyone that in the mainstream media that attempts to defend the indefensible, is that, well, Hunter Biden, those are the rantings of a disturbed, drug addicted man. But from an investigator's perspective, you back up from all of that. You don't get emotionally involved in what the source of the evidence was. You look at what the results are and the corroborative evidence. And in this case is the old saying of follow the money. So the rantings of a disturbed and troubled, drug addicted young man that's making stuff up and desperately trying to seize influence where really none existed. if that was the case, then where did the millions of dollars come from?
I mean, we know for a fact that a few days later, $5 million plus moved. So in other words, it's not like the Chinese guy goes, oh, Hunter Biden is obviously on a crack spree. I'll ignore this message because he's obviously ranting and raving. He's not serious, and his dad isn't sitting there. They obviously took it seriously because they paid up.
That's right. And this is what is going to force both the mainstream media and that faction of our country who seems to just refuse the gradually revealed clear truth about the Biden crime family, and the fact that the president of the United States, Joe Biden, is compromised, and therefore our entire nation is compromised. What's going to gradually force people into acceptance of that truth is the documentation of money transactions. The Biden family had about 150 known suspicious activity reports. These are reports required by law to be generated by a bank that is federally insured. These are reports to the Treasury Department. If the bank independently observes a suspicious transaction of money that appears to be indicate money laundering or something like that. So most Americans will go their whole life, including small businesses moving large sums of money, sometimes would oversee vendors and contractors, and never receive a suspicious activity report. And so many of us didn't know what a suspicious activity report was. We didn't know what an SAR was until it was revealed to us that the Biden family, in a short period of time, just a few years, had received, that we know of, 150 SARs. Each of them are a significant piece of evidence to be observed and compiled to put the whole puzzle together. And the deeper we look at it, Ramesh, the more disturbing it is. It seems very clear that Joe Biden is a compromised president, and his family has been involved in laundering monies that have been delivered to them for years, millions and millions and millions of dollars, through a dozen or more shell companies that were created to hide and launder that money. And why was that money paid from countries like Romania and Ukraine and China? The only thing we can see that they were selling was access to Joe Biden.
Given the reluctance of the mainstream media to cover the story, is it not a fact that the only thing that forces them to cover it would be an impeachment proceeding? Because there's no way to ignore that if you're CBS or ABC or the New York Times. Republicans tend to be sticklers for, let's make sure we've kind of dotted every I, crossed every T before we take that kind of a step. What would you say is missing? What else has to come out? What more needs to be found to convince the mainstream of the GOP that, look, we've crossed the Rubicon here. This is the way to get this information out to the American people. We need to begin this proceeding, not just against Merrick Garland, but against Joe Biden.
Well, let me say I'm one of those conservative voices that advises caution regarding attempting to cross the threshold that was established by our founders to be the most restrictive process that we have access to. The impeachment of a sitting president of the United States was intended by our founders to be almost impossible. And the threshold that must be crossed is quite high, or should be quite high. And Republicans should be the party of constitutionalist principles. And therefore, I believe we should look to the Oversight Committee, as we're currently performing, to deliver a clear, calm, judicious assessment of condemning evidence. And this should not be rushed. It should not be driven by politics. And let me say that I agree that Joe Biden has committed impeachable acts. However, as a committed principled constitutionalist man, I recognize that the impeachment of a sitting president of the United States should be a final exercise in that reveal. I do not think we should use the impeachment process through the Judiciary Committee to reveal the impeachable actions of our president when the Oversight Committee is effectively doing so. And that should be a timeline that unfolds according to the investigative process, not by dates on a calendar that reflect our election cycle. So I think we're in the process of both revealing the criminal behaviors of the Biden crime family and Joe Biden. And I believe we're also in the process of approaching November of 2024, where we'll be rid of Joe Biden anyway. So I think if we get to the point of impeachment, then our investigation through oversight will determine that on its own timeline. I don't think we should rush that timeline. I hope that respectfully answers your question.
It certainly does. Thank you, Congressman Higgins. I really appreciate it. Good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you, Dinesh. God bless you, sir.
The debt ceiling crisis has come to a head. The administration is doing its best to force more government spending. How irresponsible. They reached a settlement to get this deal done for now, but the national debt continues to skyrocket. Now, how are you protecting your savings? Times like these are when concerned savers like me turn to gold. And I, like thousands of similar-minded people, buy my gold from Birch Gold. Here's the easiest way to do it. Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. You don't pay a penny out of pocket. As the BRICS group, this is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, band together against the dollar, more and more central banks are diversifying. You know what they're buying? Gold. Follow their lead. Get started by texting Dinesh to 989898. You'll get a free information kit on gold. There's no obligation, just information. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of happy customers. Birch Gold can help protect your savings too. Get started. You have nothing to lose. Text Dinesh to 989898 today. I want to talk about COVID lies, not lies that are spread by misinformed activists on the right, for which there has been now 2.5 years of censorship on digital platforms. I want to talk about COVID lies being promoted by the top levels of the government. COVID lies promoted by people like Rochelle Walensky, the CDC director, by Fauci. These are lies by people who are in a position to know better and did know better. Now, this is very important because there's a difference between a lie and false information that you unwittingly put out. So I saw a meme on social media. It referred to an article that supposedly was in The Atlantic. It looked like the font of The Atlantic. I shared the article. I then realized, in fact, someone pointed out in the notes, this article never appeared in The Atlantic. Somebody actually made a meme of this to make it look like The Atlantic. So essentially, I was deceived. I immediately deleted the post. Why? Because I wasn't lying. It looked to me like it was an article from The Atlantic. I was commenting on it. Once I realized that the article was fake, I obviously pulled my post down. So that's the distinction between a lie and an error that is honestly entered into. Now, when Rochelle Walensky went before the American people, in fact, she went in media reports, and you can see these videos on social media, and she said that vaccinated people, quote, don't carry the virus, and they, quote, don't get sick. And she was making two critical points. One, that if you take the vaccine, you won't get COVID. And if you take the vaccine, you won't give anybody else COVID. And this was the clear rationale, the foundation for harassing people, threatening people, firing people, removing people from the government, removing nurses from hospitals. It said, you are so obstinate that you won't take a vaccine that is not only good for you, but it's also good for you giving. It will help you not transmit the virus to other people. Now, more recently, when Walensky went before Congress and she was asked about this, she defended herself by saying that those statements were, quote, true at the time. So she said, in effect, we didn't know better. We thought it was that way. And so that's what we said. That was the information available to us at the time. And this is actually a valid defense. It's a valid defense because you cannot be expected to know information that only comes out later, information that is not at the time available to you. So this is her defense, and it sounded like a good defense. But it turns out that she was misrepresenting herself because emails obtained through the Freedom of Information Act show there's a kind of an email exchange going on between Rochelle Walensky and former NIH Director Francis Collins. And what is the subject of these emails? Quote, breakthrough cases of COVID among people who have taken the vaccine. So think about this. We're talking now about January of 2021, so about 8 months into COVID. And Rochelle Walensky is well aware that there are people who've taken the vaccine and they're getting COVID. So her statement that, quote, vaccinated people don't carry the virus, false. Her statement that they don't get sick, false. Her implication that you can't transmit the virus, false. And the important point is she knew it was false because we now know she was discussing this problem with Francis Collins. In fact, in the email, she even says that she is looping Anthony Fauci into these conversations so that he too is well aware that there are these breakthrough cases of COVID. So this is really the point. It would not be a scandal if you don't know better, if you took the best information and said something based on that and then later had to revise it based upon new information, new data, and so on. But it's quite clear that these people knew better. They recognized that they were lying to Congress, lying to the American people. Even later, like I say, when she was called up to defend her statement, she defends it by another misrepresentation. Well, at the time, this is what we knew. This is what I thought was true at the time. No, even at the time, you knew that there were these so-called breakthrough infections. So all of this has contributed to a legitimate, I would say a valid distrust of the health authorities, people like Walensky, people like Fauci. These are the people in the lab coats who tell you, in a sense, this is what the science says, this is what the evidence shows, and they themselves know, because they're talking about it behind closed doors, they themselves know that what they're saying to you is flat out untrue. Guys, I'd like to invite you to check out my Locals channel. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content that is censored on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also interact with me directly. I do a weekly Q&A every Tuesday live. It's typically 8 p.m. Eastern, and no topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some very cool films to Locals, both documentaries and feature films, both my films and also films by other independent producers. 2000 Mules is up there, and I'm doing a new film this year, very exciting. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on Locals. If you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch all of these films for free, including the forthcoming new one. So check out my channel. It's free to check it out. It's dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com. If you want to see a country that is ruining its place in the world, that is undermining its own influence, that is doing harm to its own interests, you want to find a country that is injuring its allies and helping its enemies. Now, we can see in all kinds of ways that the Biden regime is helping our enemies. The Biden regime is trying to restore the Iran deal, which would help Iran, our adversary in the Middle East, our leading adversary. Biden has done all kinds of things to help China. Now, there's some argument that he's doing this because China has put a lot of money into the back pockets of the Biden family, and he's a bought-off asset of China. I wouldn't myself go that far. But I would say that he is compromised by his dealings with China. So this is the helping your enemies category. But what about hurting your friends? There's a report out by Free Beacon. This is freebeacon.com. Biden administration defends controversial move to slash Israeli research funding. What is this referring to? Turns out that the United States has a whole bunch of partnerships with Israel. This is research projects on all kinds of, on technology, on medicine, and so on. And out of kind of nowhere, the State Department has put out a, quote, policy guidance to relevant agencies. And they basically say that, quote, bilateral scientific and technological cooperation with Israel is not allowed in areas that are disputed. Now, what are the disputed areas? Well, basically, it's so-called Judea and Samaria. These are the biblical names. Of course, the modern names are East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. Now, even though these are sometimes called disputed territories, they're not disputed. They were won fair and square in battles between Israel and the Arabs. Battles, by the way, initiated by the Arabs. They tried to invade and destroy Israel. Israel turned around and pummeled them. These areas came under Israeli control. They're now under Israeli rule. There are settlements being built in these territories. But of course, the United States, this is particularly true under Democrats, takes the view that those settlements are still disputed. They are somehow, quote, under negotiation. There's no real negotiations going on. It's not as if Israel is going to basically go, yeah, you can have the West Bank back. Yeah, you take back East Jerusalem. Here's the Golan Heights, Egypt. We took it from you. You can have it back. No, these places are not going back. This concept of negotiations is a little bit of a fiction. And true, there is a Palestinian problem that Israel has to deal with. But in order to ally itself with the Palestinians and against Israel, this is the point. By and large, any Jewish companies that are located in the West Bank or in the Golan Heights are now off limits for U.S. technological and scientific cooperation. Now, the Israelis are sort of outraged by this, and so are a number of Republicans. Nikki Haley, for example, says that, hey, if this was scientific projects in China, Biden would be for it. Here's Ted Cruz. The State Department is telling the entire U.S. government not to cooperate with Jews in Judea and Samaria. And Ted Cruz goes on to point out that the Biden people actually issued this guidance, this policy guidance, in secret. It was just that someone in the media found out about it. Here's Free Beacon reporting on it. There's little secret that the Biden people, because they're on the left, do not like the Israeli government, particularly the Netanyahu government. They are constantly trying to undermine the Netanyahu regime. In fact, there are a number of indications that the Biden administration has been funding left-wing advocacy groups in Israel that are trying to overthrow Netanyahu. So talk about intervention in another country's democratic politics. By the way, this was not started by Biden. We know now, flashing back to Obama, that Obama hated Netanyahu. Obama, as part of his anti-colonial philosophy, saw Israel as part of Western colonialism. There's sort of a colonial outpost of the West in the region. So he tried to undermine the Netanyahu government during his tenure, and Biden is now clearly picking up on it. So this is a way of slapping your own allies while advancing and helping your enemies. And this is the way in which the Biden regime is weakening America around the world, including with our sole reliable ally in the Middle East. It seems like the Magic Kingdom, Disney, has lost its magic, and I, for one, am very happy about it. Now, the reason that Disney has lost its magic is very clear. It's that a series of movies, one after the other, has been pushing one or other aspect of the woke agenda, and we can see the results at the box office. In fact, recently a movie analyst sat down and did the math. He was calculating the effect of 8 Disney movies. And by the way, at least half of those movies have LGBTQ characters or themes. Thor, Love and Thunder talked about one of the characters' same-sex parents. Strange World had Disney's first openly gay main character. Lightyear had a same-sex kiss. Elemental has the first, quote, non-binary character. So Disney here has an agenda, and the agenda, as I mentioned before, very almost the opposite of what Disney used to be. Disney used to be kind of a company that encouraged imagination, fantasy, good and evil, Americana, and now it's essentially pursuing this far left agenda. And look, people don't like it. People don't like it here, and they don't like it even abroad, because one of Disney's massive recent bombs was the film that was released in China. Disney has been making a lot of money in China, but it's with the latest movie, virtually no money. The Chinese just don't even want to see it, and that's because it's The Little Mermaid featuring a black lead. Now, some people on the left here, oh, that's because the Chinese are racist. Well, it's not because they're racist. They recognize that they're being sold an ideological agenda across the board. And quite frankly, most of the world has no interest in this. This is basically domestic American politics and domestic American race issues, gender issues, transgender issues that are being sort of thrust on the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is like, leave us alone. So there's a kind of a pushback against it, but also in America. So according to the math, that Walt Disney Company has lost $900 million at the box office over the past 12 months for 8 of its films. In other words, this is not sometimes, when you're releasing films, you have a hit, a bomb, a hit, a bomb. So that is expected. No studio scores every single time. But Disney's revenue numbers are a little misleading because sometimes when you hear a film made $100 million at the box office, you think, well, the $100 million went to Disney. No, less than $50 million went to Disney because the rest of it goes to the theater chain. So if a movie costs $100 million to make and it makes $100 million, that movie actually loses money. In fact, it takes in less than half of what it cost. And this is what's been happening with Disney. Bomb after bomb after bomb after bomb. And I, for one, think it's great. Now, no company can continue like this. And Disney, of course, recognizes this. In fact, recently, the returning Disney CEO, Bob Iger, announced the company is going to cut costs by $5.5 billion. It's going to terminate 7,000 jobs. Now, I obviously feel bad for people who are not part of Disney's ideological agenda, people who work there, but it does seem like a lot of the employees have been pushing within Disney for Disney to go this route. And so they have got to face the consequences of making bad movies and running a company that is not really serving its customers. At some point, the axe has to fall on the woke department, and it's already starting to happen. So the latest article I see, Disney's diversity czar quits after massive failure of race-swapped Little Mermaid non-binary elemental movies. And we're talking here about this woman, Latondra Newton, Disney's chief diversity officer since 2017. Now, of course, Disney doesn't want to say, in fact, they don't really admit that she's been fired. And so they put out the usual boilerplate. I'm going to read from it because it's just kind of funny. She goes that Latondra has decided to leave the Walt Disney Company to pursue other endeavors. In other words, this is a case where being kicked out the door is called she's decided to leave. Quote, Latondra has led the company's strategic diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, including blah, 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 blah. I know you all join me in thanking Latondra, blah, 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 blah. So this is what corporations do. They put out this stuff. It's not only is it meaningless, it's actually the opposite of what is actually being meant. Because think about this. I know you join me in thanking Latondra. Why would we thank Latondra if it's this diversity nonsense that's caused Disney to lose $900 million? Thank you, Latondra. You've cost us $900 million. You're now leaving. We wish you all the best. I mean, yeah, this is the kind of thing. And, this is when people leave, when people die, you're supposed to say nice things about them. So I kind of get it. But the rest of us who are observing and trying to make sense of all this shouldn't really be fooled. By the way, this Latondra character is the same person who pioneered the Disney memo to the Disney staff in the wake of the death of George Floyd, where she basically says, we've got to be committed, blah, 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 blah. And so that's part of what that accelerated Disney was already moving in this direction. And they aren't alone in being accelerated by the events of George Floyd. We saw this sweeping across corporate America, but Disney, for one, is now having to pay the price.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.